Good morning again. I'm Kathleen Weeden. I'm the city engineer for the City of Venice. I also am the Stormwater Utility Director. So I manage the storm pipes when it rains and the water goes on the ground. After that, it becomes my responsibility until it discharges. So when we do beach renourishment, and that's really our first line of defense for a hurricane and flooding. Flooding is, I'm going to talk about a little bit different. One of the things that people talk a lot about is hurricane and the winds and what damages you can anticipate. I'm going to talk about what happens with the water. Water that comes in can do a lot of damage. It's very dangerous. In big hurricanes, we have more loss of life from storm surge than we have from winds in most cases. Beach renourishment, a lot of people think that beach renourishment is just a nice way for us to have pretty beaches, and that is kind of a side benefit of beach renourishment. Tourism is a very important economic driver to our area, but the first reason we have it is storm surge protection. We have a berm at 9 feet, so that allows when we get a storm surge come in, they'll say you have a storm surge of 6 feet. You have to figure that 6-foot storm surge has breaking waves on top of it. Prior to renourishment in early 1994, you can see that the water was right up to the buildings on the north end of the island. After renourishment, we have a nice thick beach that protects us when the waves action comes on land. That wave action is first addresses by the sand. The beach renourishment project is specifically designed. You'll see over the winter the beach is eroded. We had that southwest wind just last week. Now we have a lot more sand. The design template allows the sand to erode, be placed in the near shore, and then the next storm that comes by pops the sand right up back onto the beach. And about every 10 years, we add around 700,000 cubic yards. But that's only about 25% of the sand we put there in the first place. So it's performing very well. One additional item about the renourishment is because the jetty is there, the sand normally would flow from north to south and we would continue to have sand. If you go walk out on the jetty and you look to the north up to Nokomis Beach, you'll see a big wide sand, and then you turn around and look towards Venice and you'll see that the sand is, hundreds of feet further landward, and that's because the sand can't pass the jetty and continue to deposit on the open beach as it would in a normal coastal system without an inlet present. That's also the reason why the Corps of Engineers funds 65% of the beach project, and then through the state agency, through DEP, they also fund about half of our share. So we only end up paying about 12.5% of the big dollar amount you see being spent. Another picture before and after from the 2005 event. The hot spot that we have just south of the jetty, what it looked like before we renourished and after we renourished. There's two different types of flooding that you need to be aware of. One is the coastal flooding, which is the storm surge, which I just talked about quite a bit. You can see that's what closes the jetty. That's why we see in Flamingo Ditch, if you live near that area, you'll see the storm surge will come up the waterways, up Roberts Bay, and it'll continue inland. You'll see on your flood maps that there's some flooding that's right around all the waterways, and that's a lot to do with storm surge. The other type of flood is riverine flooding. Riverine flooding is what falls on the ground that runs through the natural channel systems. You have swales, you have the channels and Blackburn Canal into Curry Creek, and then eventually Roberts Bay and out the inlet. You can see here that's Mayaca River State Park, or Venice Mayaca River Park on the left. We had specifically designed that beach, or the kayak canoe launch, so that it goes up and down, because we get a fluctuation of about 9 feet between low stage and high stage in the water at the river. And then the other one is the Venice Avenue intersection. We did a large project with assistance from FEMA funding and our stormwater utility, and upsized the pipes. It used to be 10 years ago when you came down the Venice Bridge, every afternoon when it rained, you had water up to your knees. Now we don't see that. The water dissipates, we have larger pipes, and we have ponds to treat the water prior to discharge, which is, you'll see Ruscelletto Park is at the corner. It's kind of across from CVS, right at the corner of Venice Avenue and the bypass. There's a little park there. That's actually a stormwater management pond. And so we put a trail around it, we made it attractive, and so it can be used by the community as well. What can you do to protect yourself from flooding? Know your flood zone. Kat Herring is our CRS coordinator. She's over next door and she's doing flood zone determinations today. I'll be here tomorrow doing the same thing. You can always call Kat Herring or anyone at the city engineering department. They'll refer you to her, and if she's not available, either to me or one of our engineers, and you'll be able to find out what your flood zone is. That tells you what your level of risk is. All of Florida is a flood zone. It's just a matter of whether you're in the special flood hazard area, which is the 100-year flood zone, or expected to a 1%. Now, as you well know, we had a 500-year flood just right after Irma. We had a very large 2-day flood event, and had they been combined together, because it goes by 24 hours, we would have had more than one 500-year storm. We had a lot of water during that time. So you want to buy flood insurance. Flood insurance is funded self-funding entity through the federal government, through FEMA. You buy your flood insurance, and what goes in comes back out. If you don't live in a flood zone, or you have a house that's built to the flood zone, your premium will be pretty reasonable. I have an elevated house. I'm near a flood zone, but I was removed through the new maps from the flood zone. My personal house, I still carry flood insurance, because 25% of all flood claims are outside the special flood hazard area. The water won't stop at that line and say, oh, nope, not going any further than that. And register for Code Red. You heard that earlier today. It's real important. If we have flooding condition coming or something happening, they're going to let you know on Code Red if you're registered. And know your evacuation level. As the previous speaker spoke about the signs, the stop signs, a lot of them have those levels. You can find that information on the website. There's a lot of information on the website, or you can call and find out as well. And again, there's Kat's card, Catherine Herring. She's a great resource. What can you do to protect yourself? Build responsibly. I think that's important. If you're doing a substantial improvement, you'll be required to bring your house into FEMA elevations. But if you're doing a lot of work on your home, or you have an opportunity, make your house more resistant to flood waters. You can retrofit your property, especially if you had a repetitive loss, which means you've had more losses of over $1,000, at least 3, then you have an opportunity to look for and potentially get a 75% grant to actually be able to elevate your flood insurance. So that's another thing. If you have flood claim, a lot of people don't want to file. They think it's going to raise their insurance rate. They're worried about other issues. If you don't file those claims when you have them, then you don't qualify for the grant and the extra mitigation money. And elevate your utilities. You don't want to have water that doesn't get in the house, but now you don't have air conditioning. You've lost all your electrical because that is not elevated high enough. What can you do to protect yourself? Number 3, before the storm, you want to put those important papers and inventory, insurance papers in a safe place. Take pictures of your house. Take pictures of the entire house on the inside. If you've got a nice computer, take a picture of the computer. Anything you have that you're concerned about losing will come in really handy. And just once a year, go around your house, take a picture of the house so you can prove to the insurance company what your house looked like, what everything was beforehand, so when there's damage that you don't already have your documentation in hand. Don't dump things down the storm drain. Every drain pretty much in this whole area ultimately ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. And we all know we went through red tide last year. We have had water quality issues. It's very important. Don't put things down the drain. Not only does it get carried on if you don't pick up after your pets, if you over-fertilize your lawn, all that, it goes right into the Gulf of Mexico. And you don't want to degrade our water quality. It's very important. Also, you don't want to put lawn cuttings and everything else in the drains, because then it can clog up the drain. And a flood can happen because we got an inch of rain, but somebody blocked up your drain outside your house, and now all of a sudden the water has risen and it's in your home, and your homeowner's insurance will consider that a flood event. And make sure and teach children about floods. There's nothing more fun than splashing in puddles, but they need to know the safety aspects of flooding and what it really means. You can secure, when they have a storm coming, secure your openings. You can place sand or mulch bags in front of the openings. If you use mulch, you can just freshen up your garden beds afterwards. Make sure your downspouts are functioning and that they're pointed away from the house so they're not adding additional water to your house. And if you had flood vents, make sure they're open and functioning. The design of the flood vents, if you're in a flood zone, is for the water to go under your house and not damage it structurally and not come into the house. Turn around, don't drown. We can't stress that strongly enough. I'm sure you've seen many times on the news where someone has driven into floodwaters and now they're in a dangerous situation. 6 inches of water can sweep a car away or knock you off your feet. 2 feet can carry a large truck away. So even though you're wading in the water up to your knees and you think it's not that deep, water is extremely powerful. And call 911. If you have an issue, make sure you're calling 911. They're there to help. If you had a flooding, make sure that you turn off your electricity at the, contact the power company. If it's safe to get to your main breaker, but stay out of it, because if there's any active electric, it's going to potentially be a danger to you. Watch for power lines that are down. It may be down across the room, but if it's in a little bit of water and you're staying in that same water, it's going to impact you. Watch out for animals, insects, and other hazards. Ants and insects and animals look for high ground, and when you're staying in the water, guess what you are? You are high ground. And so you want to make sure not to do that. Do not enter your flooded building. Everyone likes to get in there and see what happened, but you need to have a building inspector come and take a look at it, make sure it's safe. A large majority of our injuries come after the storm as people try to recover, and they jump in and try to fix things that they either are unsafe to go into in the first place, or they may not be in the physical condition. It's usually hot, it's summer, and you're out there trying to clear limbs and branches, and so be cautious. And watch out for gas leaks. If you do have gas in your home, be especially cautious about that. In order to facilitate, if you have gotten some water in your house, you want to dry it out. If your air conditioning is working, turn on your air conditioning. That'll help get the humidity out, get a dehumidifier. You might want to buy one in advance. Do a follow-up photograph and list all of the items that have been damaged right away as soon as you can safely get into the home. Report any broken utilities or electrical systems to the appropriate agencies. And until you've formally been told through Code Red, it's always a good safety precaution. Just go ahead and boil your water, especially if there's been water outage. When the water comes back on, there's been a pressure loss, and so we'll have a boil water. The reason we do the boil water is an added safety to make sure, because the water's been sitting stagnantly in the lines, and we want to make sure you're safe. We don't want anyone to get sick from drinking the water that hasn't been properly flushed out. Do I need flood insurance? My answer will always be yes. You're in Florida, it floods. We have storms, we have rain events that are 27 inches that are not in a flood any time we're expecting to be flooded. Most of Florida is in the moderate risk area, if not in a flood zone. As I said before, 25% of all claims come from areas that are not in a flood zone. So you think you're safe, you're like, oh, my mortgage says I don't have to carry flood insurance anymore. I had that happen to me this year. My flood insurance got canceled because I'm not in a flood zone. So my mortgage just decided that I don't need it anymore. And so I get this notice that my flood insurance canceled. Well, they sent the bill to the mortgage company. Mortgage company said, you're not in a flood zone, you don't need it. So I had to call my agent directly, change the billing to me directly, pay the premium, wait 30 days, because when you get flood insurance, it's not good for 30 days. So we have 23 more days that it cannot rain. Just for me, I appreciate that. And that downtown project, I'm not having anything to do with. It'd be great if we didn't have rain for that either. Insurance is required for all federally backed mortgages. So if you live in a flood zone and you have a mortgage, but a lot of people here have paid cash for their homes, or they've paid them off and they're in retirement, and it seems $400 seems like a lot to pay for insurance, but it really, if you count down per day how much protection you're getting, it's worth it. Because homeowners insurance does not cover flood, anything under that water line would not be covered. So, for example, if you figure we got a foot of water in this place, take a line and draw it a foot above the floor, and think about in your home. What you'd find is everything that on the floor would be no longer usable in most cases. So that's all your carpeting, your drywall. The water goes up the wall. You've got your electrical, structural, tiles, refrigerator, shoes. I don't know about you guys, but I had a lot more shoes. I had flood in my house, and I could not believe how many pairs of shoes I had. And mine happened to be a septic tank backup, so they all had to go. Thus my ugly shoes now. No, And as I said before, flood insurance, homeowners insurance does not cover flood. So if you have a storm, you have the hurricane insurance, but you get water in your house from seeping under the doors, it is not covered. You will be on your own. Also, by having flood insurance, you have the access to low-interest loans through FEMA to help you to do repairs that may exceed your flood insurance and your other insurance premiums availability. An elevation certificate is the only way to know if your house, what your finished floor is. So if you're in a flood zone, an elevation certificate will tell you, is my finished floor higher than the minimum required? A lot of the older homes were built at 9 or 10 feet, and the flood elevation's at 10 or 11 feet. So you're 2 feet below. Your first clue will be your flood insurance will be expensive because you're at a higher risk than the average person who has their home built in accordance with the codes. So that's the only way to verify where your finished floor is. The higher the finished floor, the lower the risk zone, the lower the premium. And flood insurance, as I said, takes 30 days to take effect. So if you want to be covered for this hurricane season, now's the time to get your policy written because hurricane season starts June 1st.